And the rabbi took 2 of us, Simon Bar-Jonah and myself, who am the least of his disciples, and sent us forward to his mother's house to announce the tidings of his coming. For it is not well to come with suddenness and surprise, but to send forward news thereof. And we came into the house, and his mother sat with her sons and daughters at the table, and they ate the honest bread of the labourer. For it was the hour when the worker eateth his evening meal. And we bowed ourselves and said, Peace be unto ye. And the people looked upon us in astonishment, and they asked whence we came. And we said, We are sent unto you by your son and brother. He sendeth through us the tidings of his coming, and he standeth without at your door. And at first they sat thus at their bread, and knew not what to answer for surprise. Then one of his brothers-in-law spoke and said, Wherefore is he come? To blacken our faces again in the eyes of the people of the city? But the mother rose and stretched forth her arms and said, Where is my beloved child, that I may embrace him? And she took up the oil lamp from the table, and she stood on the threshold of the door, and she called into the night, Tinoki, Tinoki, my little one, my little one. And the rabbi answered, Imi, Imi, which signifieth, My mother, my mother. And he came before her, and he bowed himself and said, Mother, crown of my head, peace be unto thee. And she answered him, My firstborn, peace be to thy homecoming. And he embraced his mother and kissed her, and he went into the house, and we, his disciples, with him. And the house of his mother was not large, and there was not much space therein, for the workbench of carpentry stood there. Now, when the rabbi had forsaken the house, that he might do the work of God, his brother Jacob had taken over the carpentry, that he might give sustenance to the household, as it is written, Great is work, it honoureth him that is occupied therein. And Jacob rose before his brother, and bowed himself, and said, Greeting to thee in thy homecoming, my rabbi and my oldest brother. Is peace with thee? And our rabbi answered, Peace is with me. My Father in heaven was with me all the time. Is peace with you, my brothers? And Jacob and the others answered, Peace. But the brothers-in-law, the husbands of the sisters, rose and went from the house, for they were angered against him. And the mother said to her sons, Go, bring water and wash the hands and feet of the guests, and I will go prepare the best that is in the house, a meal for thee and for the guests that came with thee, for ye must surely be hungry and thirsty from the way. And my rabbi answered, I pray thee, do not go, but remain with me, that my eyes may sate themselves with thy countenance, for it is long that I have not seen it. Let my brothers prepare the evening meal, and they that came with me shall help them, for they are my disciples, and it is good that disciples shall serve their rabbi, and they are skilled therein. And his mother said, Let all the oil lamps be lit, for today it is Sabbath with me. I have set aside and kept in the store a gourd flask with some good oil, against the time of my son's return. Go now, bring the cruse of honey, and go into the stall and milk the sheep, and let there be prepared a meal of beans and green stuff, and let cakes be placed on the table, for it is a great festival with me now. My son hath come home. And we went to carry out the commandments of the mother, and we made a fire in the oven which was in the yard, and we prepared the cooking of the meal. And the brothers rose and left their mother alone with her eldest son. For many days had passed since he had left his mother's house, and they longed to be alone and to converse with each other. But I stood by the door and looked in through an opening, and I saw in the light of the lamp the face of the mother shining with joy, but her eyes were sad and wet with tears, and she looked on her son sorrowingly. The skin of her face was wrinkled like a leaf in autumn with the lines of care, and her countenance was like unto the book of Job, save that her eyes were like the song of songs, and her lips trembled, and the veins that were on her thin neck. And she said, My son, I was with thee in every need. And he held her right hand, which had known much labor, and he said, My mother, I knew it. And she said further, My heart is for ever restless for thee. There came people from Capharnaum and from other places, and they told me wondrous things concerning thee. My heart trembled between hope and fear. Thou wert oft in great need, my son. And he answered, God my Father was with me. Then his mother said, Dangerous is the path which thou treadest, my son. My heart is heavy in me. Oft times thou disappearest from me, and I see not whither thou goest. God's compassion be with thee, and may he ever be with thy footsteps. And my rabbi held his mother's right hand in his, and said, Be calm, my mother. All is for the sake of God, and for the sake of his glory. My child, I know that the grace of God resteth upon thee, and guardeth thee night and day, and it is my strength and comfort. Then said my rabbi, But tell me, how is it with thee, my mother? How is it with thee in thy house? I am an old woman. Thy father is dead. Thy brother Jacob hath taken over the labor, and he nourisheth the house meagerly and in poverty. But the children are young, and they need over them a brother's hand to guide their footsteps in righteousness. And thou art the eldest, and shouldst be their guide in the way of Jewishness, and thou hast forsaken the house, my son. And my rabbi answered her and said, My earthly father is dead, but my heavenly Father liveth, and he hath called me to make good his work, and to lead his children in the ways of righteousness. Jacob can be in my stead in the house, for he is a devout Jew. My son, when I hear thee speak thus, my heart melteth with fear. Who art thou then, my child? I myself know thee not. And my rabbi held his mother's right hand in his, and said, Be calm, my mother, and let thy heart be filled with joy, as a grape is filled with wine in the autumn. The peoples of the earth shall bless themselves in thee. Thou shalt be likened to Rachel, and to Sarah and Rebekah, the holy mothers, and thy portion shall be with them. And the mother wiped the tears from her eyes with the hem of her robe, and she said, May God so comfort thee, as thou hast comforted thy mother. Now let me go, my child, for they need my help in the room and by the fire. Behold the vessels, wash thy hands and feet, and let those that are with thee wash their hands and feet, and seat them at the table. And when she said these words, she left her son, and went into the room where the meal was being prepared. But on the way, in the joyousness of her spirit, she loosed a sandal from her foot. And when my rabbi perceived this, he hastened to her, and bent himself to the earth, and spread his hands upon the floor, and said, Mother, I pray thee, tread upon my hands, that thy naked feet may not touch the floor. But his mother said unto him, My child, I would not have thee so lower thine honor before me. And my rabbi answered her, My mother, let me fulfill the commandment of honor to mothers, even as Damiah ben Nathaniah of Askelon did for his mother. And he meant thereby a certain Cushite of the city of Askelon, whose name was Damiah ben Nathaniah, who was mighty in the fulfillment of the commandment of honor to mothers. And the sages of the city could not emulate him in his degree, and they were envious of him. And his honoring of his mother was of this degree. It chanced that he sat once at a feast with the great men of his city, and his mother appeared before them, and she spoke to him, and reproached him vilely. And she took off her sandal, and smote him therewith, for she was sick in her mind. But her son would not put his mother to shame before the chief men of the city, and he received her blows and said, "My mother, is my punishment sufficient?" And when the sandal wherewith she was beating her son fell out of her hand, then Demea ben Nathaniah bent him down and lifted up the sandal and gave it to her, that she might not have need of bending to the earth. And when I beheld the honor which my rabbi paid unto his mother, then I was filled with rejoicing in his fulfillment of the commandment, and in that he had surpassed the virtue of the Cushite Demea ben Nathaniah of Askelon.